Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to introduce my very illustrious panel very briefly, because listing their cumulative accomplishments would take up probably most of our allotted time. Hopefully you'll hear much more about their work and what they've done and are doing as we speak. Alvaro Barrington, closest to me, is a visual artist whose work ranges widely from painting to assemblages of material that might include yarn, glass, lights, milk crates, and brooms, and who has said he is concerned with celebrating communities in the way they celebrate themselves, something we'll talk about in a bit. Eneri is a Pixadora, a practitioner of Pishu. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
A transgressive cultural movement that emerged in the 1980s in the favelas of Sao Paulo, and which involves free climbing to tag the city's buildings. She'll tell us a lot more about that. Her art has been exhibited in Miami, Los Angeles, Paris, and most recently New York. She just opened the Untradeable project on the 70th floor of the World Trade Center in Manhattan, transforming the space into a hub for creation, research, and collaboration. Michele De Lucchi is a member of the Memphis Collective, founded by Ettore Sottsass in 1980, and, this is a great piece of information, the designer of the world's best-selling lamp, which is the Tolomeo by Artemidi. He has designed furniture as well as buildings all over the world and is the founder of the AMDL Circle, which works across many sectors, including architecture, design, graphics, and he was telling me other things like anthropology and psychology, we'll talk about it, aiming to provide spaces that bring people together. Alessandro Cinque, at the end, is an award-winning photojournalist whose work documents environmental and social issues in Latin America, most specifically in Peru, where he still lives and where he spent the last 6 years covering 20,000 kilometers and 35 mining communities, exploring the devastating impact of mining on the indigenous Quechua communities there. The topic of our conversation is premised on the idea that an increasing number of artists, architects, and creative figures are embedding themselves in communities, perhaps in opposition to wealth gaps and market-driven nature of the art world, or the commercial world. But perhaps another way of thinking about it, and this sort of emerged from the conversation that we had on Friday or Saturday when we just got together on Zoom to have a quick chat, was that perhaps a better way of thinking about it is that art or design helps us to understand one another and gives us access to other communities. And maybe we'll talk about those ideas. But Alvaro, can we start with the quote from the interview that I cited when I introduced you? I can't remember where it comes from. I can't remember which interview it is, but you said, "We are concerned with celebrating communities in the way they celebrate themselves," which seems like a distinction between working with communities or going into communities. Can you talk a bit about that distinction, what it means to you?
It's a very good question. I think I guess how I think about it is how I grew up. So I'm an orphan, and I lived with a lot of my mom's friends. And in each house, there was certain types of things I could get away with as a kid. So if I was, like my Aunt Zelda would allow me to do certain things, you know, my aunt, another one of my aunt would allow me to do certain things. And I think in each one of their houses, what I learned, and I actually thought about it earlier today, the great thing about being in each one of those houses, the freedom that it gave me was that it allowed me to learn how they loved and how they saw the world. And so it allowed me to sort of, you know, get to choose, oh, okay, I need to be loved a certain type of way, so I'm gonna go over and hang out over here. But this was also happening in New York City, where, like, you know, if you went to the West Village, there was a certain type of community that hung out in the West Village. There was a very different type of community that hung out in the East Village, very different type of community that hung out in Flatbush. And just being a kid from New York, I was able to sort of be in all of these neighborhoods.
Move between them.
And really got to celebrate, be in these cultural spaces that, you know, you couldn't necessarily do certain things in certain neighborhoods without being looked at as weird. But if you wanted to go to the West Village and do certain things, you could do it and be celebrated. And so as an artist, I just sort of feel fundamentally that art is about sort of being with a community, how a community celebrates themselves, and celebrating with them in that way, because then you also learn how to celebrate yourself. So I hope that.
Okay. We'll come back to something else you said on the phone on this topic, but I want to ask Eneri first about your work, because your work is extremely directly engaged with a very specific community, the Pishu community. And perhaps before we talk about that in more detail, you could actually explain to the audience what this is. I mean, I think probably few of us really know much about it. I certainly didn't before.
Okay. So I grew up in São Paulo, and the Pishu movement is something so impossible to don't see around. And for me, I think as everyone who grew up in São Paulo and some cities that are from the third world, and not only these ones, but the art scene and the museums and the institutions for me was something so fancy and so far away, because even the local where they are and the talks they have, because sometimes people try to make art so exclusive that it turns into a tool of exclusion and into a tool of marginalization. So I choose the gallery that have millions and billions visitors all day to express myself. That is the city. So I started painting in São Paulo, climbing buildings and doing the facades.
Just maybe explain what it involves.
Yeah, for sure. The Pishu movement, it breaks the aesthetic with graffiti. It's a really cultural, political movement that uses mainly the black colors and have a simple and aggressive visual. And it talks with the community because it's the way that people from the hoods express themselves. So you walk around São Paulo and now in the whole country from Brazil, and it's impossible to don't see it because people, we have a lot of people that want to express themselves, but they don't have the space to do it, so they use the city as the tool and as the stage to create the impact and to express themselves.
When I was doing a bit of research about the practice, I read that it aims to break away from the imported idea of graffiti.
Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about that?
Not only the imported graffiti, but also the whole architecture from São Paulo is imported. So it's something that breaks with this, you know, with the imported aesthetic from art, with the imported aesthetic from the city on the whole architecture. So it's to confront these imported cultures, because we live this on the clothes, on the music, on the architecture, on the art. So the Pishu is to break all of this and try to get together our own aesthetic. And I think this also happened with samba and with funk music right now. So in many ways, even from the clothes styles, I think that in Brazil, especially, and many other countries, have this urgency to get their own styles instead of value and try to import everything from especially US and Europe aesthetics.
How much do you feel, though, that you are engaging with a broader community? I mean, who is the work for? Or is it really very much a Pishu community? Or
I think we should talk with community, because also talks with the city, you know, and also it's a place you just need to grab a spray can and express yourself. So also many communities from São Paulo and from other places, the Pichu is the only art they have, you know. So it's the only art that access their places, because sometimes the institutions and the museums are so far away from them that they don't have nothing else than the Pichu itself. So it's the culture that talks with the community, because it's simple, it's aggressive, and everybody knows what it is. So it's much more easy for people from that, especially are from marginalized communities, it's much more easier for them to get this essence than some things that are showed on the institutions.
Okay. Michele, well, you're an architect. I'm tempted to ask how you feel about tagged buildings, but maybe we can come back to that. But I want to ask you about the AMDL Circle, which you founded in 1990, with the idea of creating design that will actively benefit society. And your website says, we design buildings, environments, objects, and graphics that inspire a peaceful coexistence between individuals and communities. And it sounds very idealistic and hopeful. Mm-hmm. What's it like? How does it work in practice?
Yeah. Now, in reality, everything starts from the point that as architect, as designer, we do not design only spaces or only objects, but we do not choose only the material or the color or the shape, but we inspire the behavior of people. We inspire people how to use these spaces, how to use these objects, and how to develop even the normal, the banal way of using function in a functional way, nothing else. So starting from this point, I thought that it will be important, as well as it happened to me, to transfer all this information, this approach to design, to the new generations. And so, you know, when I was looking for a job, and I'm fully Italian. I was born close to Venice. I studied in Florence, and I came here to Milan. And I knocked to the door of Ettore Sulcas. Ettore Sulcas is a preeminent architect and designer in Milan. He has an exhibition up here. And I asked him for a job. I said, I just got my diploma in architecture, and I wanted to work with you. And you know what he told me? He asked me, but you wanted to design something, but do you know the word? Do you know how the word is done? Do you know how people think in the world? Are you familiar with all the different way of understanding humanity and so and so? I was paralyzed. I never went out of Italy. Once I went to Paris. I didn't know the word, and this was very important for me. It was the most important information I got in my life. If you want to design something for the world, you have to understand the world. And you have to be open to all the possible face of the world, all the possible different attitudes. And so I want in some way to pass these information to the new generations, and instead then to get an office, an institution that would be managed by somebody without me in the future. I thought, well, instead of that, we do a kind of organization that I called the Circle, in which everybody can participate, and not only competent in architecture and design, but everybody that in some way has to do with the idea of life. psychanalysts, scientists, physicians, and so on and so on, but especially anthropologists, because we are going with technology today. We are going to separate constantly the future from the past, but there's no way. I'm sorry, I hope not to offend anybody, but we are all animals. And we are animals. I mean, we are different from animals, but we are animals. We are getting from the same kind of evolution, body evolution, brain evolution, attitude evolution, thinking evolution. So this is very important also to understand the future, how we react, because a lot of times we do not react as humans, but we react as animals. You know perfectly about that. We feel something inside ourselves that we want to explode. We are full of angerness. We are full of... this is not the way to face the future. And the circle is supposed to do like that, to think like that. With the circle we do visionary projects, because most of the time we do not spend only for satisfying the client, but to satisfy ourselves. And this is the best way to satisfy also the client. In the lift, in the building where I work, I have an advice, and it's written, please, don't give to the client what they ask for, but what they have never been able to dream about.
I want to ask how it might work in practice with a project, but let's give Alessandro a voice. Alessandro, your work is very different in the sense that you are very, very directly embedded in a community. You've got a specific social mission. Your work is a kind of activism, really. And, you know, yet your objective is also to take beautiful photographs and to show in the most appealing, if I can put it that way, most accessible way to the world what is going on in these communities that you are documenting. Is there a tension there between the social activism and the sort of aestheticization of the experience?
Yeah, basically, I feel that I changed a lot during this year, my photography, because actually I started this project 8 years ago, and after 2 years I was living in Florence, after 2 years going back to Florence and Peru, I feel the necessity to move in Peru, because looking my picture at the time, I feel that I didn't recognize at the time my privilege to white man, European guy, and I feel a little superficiality in my photography, and only after I moved in Peru and I spent 6 years living in the community, I really understand how I need to photograph the people to try to get them dignity in the fight, because my project is talking about the relationship about mining company, foreign mining company, and indigenous Quechua people. I start in Peru, and then I explain the project in Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, and I really need the time in the community to understand how I need to photograph these people. And I spent a lot of time in the community with the same problem of the community, without water, some days, or with contaminated water. And only after this experience, I accept my privilege, because I grew up in a very poor neighborhood in Florence, and when I moved in Peru, I didn't accept my privilege. But basically, I'm Italian, and I can grow up with a free extraction, free university, and this is a privilege, of course. And yes, I think now the relationship with me and the community is very deep. We help each other a lot. I work with a fixer, an indigenous journalist, and we make a fanzine because we won a National Geographic grant, and we print 500 copies in Quechua for gift to the leader of indigenous community to try to create a sense of common in the community for the problem of the contamination of water in the Andes.
You mean so that people in different communities across the country understand that there are similar experiences?
Yes, because before, basically each community talking about for the community, but this is a problem of the country, not the only community. So with this fanzine, we try to create a sense of common, and actually we did the first meeting of indigenous people with NGO in Lima, where they create an association of people with metal in the blood. And we create, thank you, the work of many NGO, and we use my photography, for example, for try to talk a lot of people. And then with this fanzine, we gift also in Ecuador and in Bolivia, because the sad thing that the people don't know that the same problem of water in a mining city, it's exactly the same in Ecuador, in Bolivia, so we try to create a community.
I'm sorry, go on, Eneri.
I just want to say that it's really nice what you are doing, and it's really nice that you recognize that you're privileged like going there. And I feel sometimes people are so close to live this experience from the communities that are poor, that they just want to live in their own bubbles, you know. So for me, like, I think it's really interesting, and it's really nice because with the zine, many other communities found that they were passing through the same problem. And I think it's only when you open yourself as you made it that you can discover that sometimes we are much closer than we think. We are much more equals than we think, because people put their own on a bubble, just face their own troubles, and they are not open to it. And also talks with what you said, because people just want what they want. They are not open to experience what the other wants to show. So it's nice when you open yourself to do this. So.
Alvaro, when we spoke on the phone on Saturday, you said you disagreed with the idea of going into the community. I mean, obviously it's a very different thing to what Alessandro is doing, but I think you were talking about the idea of sort of dropping into, as it were, help people or work with people. But perhaps I'm understanding wrongly. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, the context was, I think, about me working with, like, Notting Hill Carnival, for example. Mm-hmm. And
what did you do for Notting Hill Carnival? Did you design a float or?
So we have a couple different ways of in participating in Carnival, but I think the question was sort of phrased like where we're centering, quote unquote, the art industry, which is a phrase that Mark Spiegler usually uses for the art world, not so much like a, but that it was which sort of exists with museums and biennials and galleries, and because I sort of have been known to kind of value as much as I love going to the National Gallery, love going to Carnival, or love going to Glastonbury. It was sort of a centering of the Tate, and then kind of looking at Notting Hill Carnival as sort of a secondary part. And I didn't really think that was a correct positioning, mostly because I don't, I think of myself as an artist, and I don't think, and while I love going to a gallery and I love seeing a great painting, you know, I love, I equally love going to Carnival, which is sort of an incredible form of creation that I participate in. But it was more about, the question was more about a centering of like, a positioning that the art world, art industry isn't a community in itself. It is a community. It's a community that, you know, we all can have conversations about Picasso or Louis Bourgeois, but there's also a lineage of other communities that that I think about, that I participate in, whether it's hip hop, whether it's festivals. All of those have a particular type of creative legacy that they're operating in that I'm excited about. So I just didn't really like the centering.
So you're saying there isn't a hierarchy for you? It's
No.
all equally valid?
No, I don't think the world lives in hierarchies. You know, I think there's sort of like a kind of insistency of certain hierarchies. I do believe in systemic violence, right? Which, I mean, I've said this a couple times. I do believe that one can exercise power against another community. One group can exercise power against another group, and we have to, and I think we are in a world where today we are having conversations about that. You know, what does it mean to be a white male, or, you know, but I don't necessarily believe in the hierarchy of experiences.
Eneri, I'm just thinking from what Alvaro is saying, you're talking about the sort of the perhaps perceived centrality of an art world experience versus a sort of community experience or popular culture experience. For you, you know, you've just had this exhibition in New York. How has it been for you to move from a kind of street movement into a more formalized context for your work?
Actually, I just landed from New York from this project, and I came straight from here. But I will talk more about on Wednesday. I want to invite everybody to come and see a little more about this project and my work. But I started on the painting on the street. But I saw that if I would keep only on the street, even if I was putting some political messages, I would still not be into the whole impact that I want to cause. I will not get into all the spaces that I want to be on. So I also do paintings, sculptures, installations, as is this one that we are made in New York. That it's tried to push people to talk with, not only to contemplate, you know. So you have the aesthetic of the Pichu movement on the windows that talks with the view of the city, but also we push what is written there that talks with the view of the city to real talks. So it's a space, an open space, so people can go there and talk about some issues that are urgent and that we really need to start to think about and to talk about. And for me, the first steps to create this impact and to solve these issues is to talk. So what we are doing here right now, what I was doing in New York, for me, is much more than put a phrase or something so people can read about and just feel it. I think it's nice so people feel part of it and also contribute with the discussion and be able to talk. And we need to be open to listen and to talk and to live in this community to make these things happen.
Michele, it sounds a bit like what you were saying.
I'm just thinking that I'm very lucky. Because what I do as a part that is dedicated to functions. So everybody in some way has to use. And if it is not working, is a disaster, but if it is working, everybody use it, and I can introduce my messages, my art, my imaginations, my shapes, my colors in the products that I design. And this is a very lucky condition, because a designer in some way is much more capable to enter in everybody life and in everybody behavior. The matter is that as designers, we are very deeply and very aggressively, if you want, judged by the market. If what we do is not sellable, no way, you're cut it out. You're not able to do nothing, because the market is very serious judge. And if what you design is not easy sellable, not easy packable, not easy transferable all around the world, not easy to disassemble and to recycle, is a problem. On the other way, everything has advantage, disadvantage. On the other side, another way, we can design something that can be very much distributed all over the world, and but we lose this wonderful opportunity that you have, all of you as artists, to judge your work. Because I know you are the first judge of your work. And when you can judge what and you know, this is right, this is wrong, this I can go on, and this I can develop, this nothing is shit. Well, this is what I miss a lot.
And yet, for you, the engagement with other people and the collaboration seems to be very important in your work.
Is a question to me or to Eneri? To me? I feel that Eneri, just because she's, or even Alvaro, in some way, also Alessandro, when they do something, they know immediately the answer if what they did is valuable or unvaluable. You know if what you did is on the right direction, is the right step. Me, I have to wait for the market. And I tell you, as designer, the market is easy, because you at the end of the month, you know if you sold or you're not. In architecture, it's much more complicated, because in architecture you have to wait a lot of time to build up the building, and after you have to wait if the people that is going to live there is happy, and after you have to wait to know if it is easy to sell or not. And I have to be also wondering if everybody that didn't need this building, that didn't need this construction, is happy or not. Because for everybody, a building is just a bulky object in the middle of their way. And under the point of view, judges are so many and so difficult that it's very complicated to satisfy everybody.
I wish we had time for you to describe your happiness project, which you talked about earlier, but I want to, when on the phone, but I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and I want to ask you just one last question for all of you, just to respond in turn, which is, what does public engagement look like for you as artists or creators, and do you feel it is part of your role or not? I mean, clearly, Michele, you do.
May I start?
Yeah.
Well, I will say that I feel part of an evolution, of a world that is an evolution, and we have continuously to produce some intellectual excitement to bring the discussion on, to make it more and more gratifying the relation with other people. All this activity to to produce an evolution is part of a possible commitment that you have with yourself about a positive future. Really, what I feel very important for myself, and every morning I get up and tell myself, is be optimistic. Because to be architect, to be designer, to design for the world, and to be pessimistic is really the worst possible condition.
Alessandro, do you feel optimistic with what you do?
If we talk about mining and my project, no, because we stopped with copper and now we start with lithium. So, but I'm optimistic because I see many aware about this topic, and also with this. Globalization, the journalist is change. Now everyone is like a journalist, no? Because if we're talking about journalists, the news agency published the first picture of the people, normal people. So this globalization of information, it's optimistic for me, because now, for example, are here in Milan, and we're talking about the Andes. So in this way, I'm optimistic. But now we need the conscience of people that change. So.
Eneri, what about you? Is public engagement the objective for you? Is that your role, or do you feel that it's a more personally expressive idea?
It's not only a personally expression, because I always like to study what I'm painting, where I am, and what way I can talk with the community where I'm painting. So even in the beginning, when I was doing my signatures, I always try to put some political messages so can mix with the people's feelings somehow. So I don't know about being optimist or no. I think what I do talks a little more about my feelings and my anger, and I think sometimes we are in a positive day and sometimes not, but I think I try to be always open to talk with the place I am painting and to leave the community and to ask them about how is their lives and all these things. So when I go to do a work in some place, I never go in my mind what I'm going to do. I always like to spend some time there and see where I am before I do something, because this is the only way to talk about the place I'm going. Because even if you are studying the place online or something like this, it's not the same as being there and live. So this is one thing that is really important to me, to my creation, is to feel and to communicate with the place I am.
Yeah. Alvaro, what about you? Do you see public connection as part of your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think all art is about a public dialogue. But it's about a public, and in that dialogue, many different conversations can happen. I think, Koons is talking here on a few days from now. And I've said this a couple times. I think if you understand Made in Heaven, you understand America and you understand why Trump is president. It's the greatest artwork, one of the greatest of the last 40 years. It's, you see that artwork, you understand Trump, Melania Trump, a woman with augmented breast, and Cicciolini, and it's America's story of itself. And I think art is always a sort of public conversation about who we are, who we aim to be. The Sistine Chapel is about the birth of the idea in Western culture of the individual as a God-given right, which has created so much of the imagination that we exist in today. So I think art is always a public dialogue, even if it happens in a private space.
Yeah. Thank you, that's very nice. We have actually 0 minutes left for questions, but nonetheless, I'm going to ask whether anyone has any questions, 1 or 2 brief ones. Oh, it's not that I can see. No? Okay. Well, in that case, it just remains for me to thank everyone. I feel like we could have all spoken for much longer. Everyone was so interesting. And to say that my colleague Farah Nayeri is going to come on next with the Astor Gate, so don't go away. Thank you.